because Brian was at a wrestling show today, and I think he actually got some interviews for some audio at some point. So he was not available to watch the pay-per-view. So we're going to do this tonight in lieu of yesterday's show. We didn't do our normal Friday show. So, all right, Dave, we just watched many hours of Full Gear. What are your overall thoughts about the show? And then we'll kind of get to the news and the headlines and then the overall card.
Yeah, there's definitely newsworthy. Samoa Joe won the championship. Swerve Strickland was brought in. Like, he's probably going to be challenging Joe on the next pay-per-view. The Young Bucks got back together with Kenny Omega, shook his hand, and Jack Barry and Luchasaurus, turned down the Dunkhouse family. Ricochet became the first national champion. FTR won the tag team titles. So it was certainly a lot of news coming out of the show. I thought that I didn't think it was like one of these like all-time classic shows, but there's a lot of really good matches, a lot of blood, maybe too much. And it's the same thing as every show. And Tony Khan actually was asked and sort of addressed it without really answering it about the length of the show. I think this one went to about 12:15, 12:20 Eastern, I think. It wasn't it wasn't 1 a.m., but it was after midnight. And he did say something, and it's the thing that I think as well. It's like, I just think that AEW should be doing afternoon pay-per-views, and that way you don't have to cut down on the time of the show, and people aren't going to be as tired in the building when it gets to be 11:30. He kind of indicated that when they go back to Sundays at the start of the year for doing Sunday nights, that he won't go past midnight. Yeah. He thinks that Saturday you can do it because UFC does it, because boxing does it, and that's true. The boxing main events and the UFC main events often go into the ring at 12:30. 12:30 a.m. is when it just starts, the main events, and he's over 12:30 or by 1 and everything like that. But it does, it feels like it's a full day, long freaking time. I know every if I watch UFC from start to finish, like every single Saturday, but. And I used to. And it's funny because I never thought of UFC when I would go live for those 7-hour shows. I never thought of it as being long. Even when it was late, it was kind of like a sports event. That's what happens. I've been on the East Coast. I was in, Toronto and New York, where, after the press conference was over and I still had to write. I was up till 3, 4 in the morning. And it's just like, I just thought that's the job. But for AEW, for whatever reason, it did feel real long here, watching it on the road. You kind of expect that. And I think people who buy the shows know it by now. But, again, there's ways that they could have cut some minutes from some of the matches. But I know Tony wants those guys to go, wants everyone to go out there and have their chance to have this great match. And some do, and sometimes it falls short. There were several great matches on the show tonight, though, I thought.
What did you think about them going back-to-back with no holds barred and no DQ?
And all the blood.
Because it feels like right after that Mark Briscoe winning the TNT title, like the next two matches really suffered from the perspective of the crowd. Like, they were really quiet for things that I just assumed that they would be really jazzed up for. Like Kenny Omega and Mercedes Moné specifically were trying their hardest to get this crowd to react to things, I thought. And they just were, I don't know if they were burnt out. I don't know if they were numb to all the stuff that they saw, but the trios match, the money match, and then the women's match, I thought suffered the most because of that.
Yeah, the women's match was tough. And I thought they wrestled a really good match.
That was one of my favorite matches on the show for just talking about in-ring, but you can't forget about the crowd noise because it just wasn't there in major moments.
Yeah. So, the thing is that when you do those, one thing is when you do those kind of matches, it's really hard to go back to a wrestling match afterwards. And that's been the case for forever and ever and ever. That's why when, just thinking back to Eddie Graham, when he would do the big blow-off death match, lights out match or whatever, even if you had a world title match, put the world title match on first, because you don't want to follow a bloodbath like that with a straight wrestling match. And it's always going to be. I thought that in the 6-man,